Hi everyone, my name is Millie Thomas. I am based in the Sunshine Coast, Queensland, Australia, and I work with a wonderful charity here called End Ed as an eating disorder recovery coach. And today I just wanted to share a little bit about my coaching experience with you and give you an insight into some things that might be helpful as you embark on your coaching journey. So first of all, the three most important things that I've learned as a coach along the way to really help in the success of establishing that coach-client relationship. Definitely the first one would be establishing clear boundaries from the outset. So it's really, really important that your clients understand immediately from when they start working with you what the boundaries are, what the parameters are, what your scope of practice is, what you will do as a coach and what you will not do. Because depending on the client, you will have people who will try and take advantage of things, or you'll have people who just aren't clear on what your availability is and when they can and when they can't reach out to you and all those sorts of things. So having those really, really clear boundaries from the very beginning. Also establishing really, really good processes for when you are taking on a new client. So having really, really clear documentation, really clear agreements on conduct, on contact with the treatment team. So when you finish the CCI course, you will have a lot of wonderful resources and forms that you can adapt and use as models to then create your own, so that there's really clear documentations. You have a file on each client that you can refer back to should you need to, in case anything goes awry, and those things are all signed and dated so that you're covering yourself. I think another really important thing is working out a caseload balance. So we're obviously all very different in terms of the pressures that we have in our lives and how much time we can devote to coaching. What I've discovered is that some clients, in terms of the time that they take up, but also in terms of the physical, mental drain on you as a coach, can vary. So I think it's important when you get people to fill out those initial forms around their background, and you look at the key things for me is looking at their comorbidities. So for example, I find that with clients who have borderline personality disorder, I find that borderline personality disorder combined with an eating disorder, it really does take a lot more of my time, and I do feel a lot more drained after sessions with them, and they tend to reach out a lot more. So it's just being mindful about your balance of clients, and that might be, it's obviously going to be different for everybody, but that's something that I've noticed is really, really important, that I don't take on too many clients at one time with personality disorders, because it can be really a difficult one to navigate. Another thing that is really strong in the course, but that until I actually started working in the field did I realize just how important this is not being attached to the results. So it's really difficult when you care so much about each and every one of your clients, if progress isn't being made, to start questioning yourself as a coach, and right, well, I'm not providing, I'm not providing the right service, I'm not doing the right things. You've got to remember at the end of the day that it is up to the individual, it is up to the client. The nature of recovery is that it is a roller coaster, it is difficult, and you're only going to be able to help and assist to a certain point. And it might be because that person isn't quite ready, isn't quite there yet, or it might be because, they are self-sabotaging. I mean, there are a myriad of reasons, and there will be a number of times where you feel like with some clients that you're going round in absolute circles, or you're banging your head against a brick wall. But I just want to say, never underestimate the power of your constant presence in their journey, walking alongside them. A lot of clients say to me, I understand that it must be frustrating because I'm not listening to you right now, but the fact that you're still there for me and you're not giving up on me, it's like you're my rock. And so I think it's really being mindful of, okay, don't be attached to the results, but know that even just your presence can be really, really powerful for clients.
So what are at least 3 important things that you have learned as a coach that you want to share in order to help other coaches be successful? So there's so many things, and I was trying to think about where do I even start? But I guess the first thing that comes to mind is be a good listener and ask really good questions. You're not there to solve your clients' problems. You're there to support and empower them to make choices for themselves, really. And so I learned that pretty early on, and I found that I was burning myself out pretty quickly by trying to find all of the answers. I felt like I needed to know everything. But what I realize now is that they'll solve their own problems, and they're really, really good at doing that. And it's your job to help bring out that healthy part of them and to show it to them. So listen well and ask really good questions. The second thing that I would say is really important is the eating disorder self, healthy self concept. Start with that and spend time on it. Because it really, what I found with my clients is that when they could really grasp that concept, that they always have a core healthy self, and over time, for many different reasons, it's become this split off part of themselves. I think it's a really empowering place to start, and you can always bring everything back to that point. And so, get that one really solid, and things will evolve more easily from that point. And the third thing, just as a new coach in the field, just know that this is a whole new pathway that people haven't walked down before, and you're doing something new, and you will come up against different challenges along the way. You'll have people who don't really believe in what you're doing, or people who are afraid of your lived experience and how that might be risky. So just remember that there will be people who will really want answers. So be ready and willing to take that on. People are afraid of new things sometimes. So just stay strong in that what you're doing is really valuable, and that your lived experience is really valuable, and your training is really valuable. So they're 3 things that I would say.
Hi everyone, my name's Jenny. I'm one of Carolyn Costin's certified eating disorder recovery coaches, and in this video I'm going to be talking to you about 3 important things that I've learned as a coach. If I look away, it's because I have my notes over there, because once the camera comes on, I'll just forget everything. So 3 things, and I might do more than 3 as I'm talking here, that I've learned from my coaching experience. The first is that co-creating goals with the client and or treatment team is really important. If the client has a treatment team, establishing a relationship with the therapist and or dietitian from the get-go can be really helpful. And if the client doesn't have a treatment team, that's fine, but making sure that the client is on board for the goals. It also gives you a sense of direction and creates accountability, and it's really helpful in the moment, especially when you're trying to push a client, to have these goals in place so you can remind them what the goal is and why you're pushing them. A second thing I've learned through coaching is that it is really important to be flexible. Sometimes for myself, I attach my effectiveness as a coach to how well the client's doing, and you can't do that. So because sometimes they're up and sometimes they're down, and if you are judging how well you're doing by how well they're doing, it's setting you up to fail. So being flexible with the amount of progress they're making. So in the moment, sometimes I check in with myself about like, am I doing this because this is what they want, or am I pushing this because I feel like this is what I think they should be doing next, or how quickly they should be progressing or moving. So just really checking in with yourself about that and making sure everything that's motivating you is based on what's in the best interest of the client, and just being flexible to what their recovery path looks like. There's no one right way to recover, and yes, while I can like speak from experience and say, oh, this worked for me, it's not necessarily fair to put that on them. I hope that makes sense. I don't know. My next thing that I brought up, self-care. Self-care is so important. Making sure you are going into sessions mentally, emotionally, physically, if you're spiritual at all like me, spiritually sound. Because especially in the beginning, clients can be very difficult. They can, working with this population can be very draining. So it's really important that, I think Anna was the one that used to say this, put on your own oxygen mask first. And also you're working with a population that's extremely sensitive. So, I mean, there's been times I've come into sessions where I'm off and like the client sniffs it out, and they'll even ask. And you know what? Sometimes I do own it. Especially since this whole COVID thing, I've had to be more transparent with my clients. I was experiencing a lot of anxiety in the beginning about like going to the grocery store for different reasons, obviously. And with clients that I had a relationship with, we talked about that. We talked about the difficulties of not being able to see my friends and living alone, and things like that. Not to make it all about you, but some self-disclosure in that sense, I think is really good and shows that you're human. So yeah, just really making sure you're grounded going into sessions, that you're taken care of. I mean, of course, no one's perfect. This doesn't happen all the time, like we're human. But I think that's really important. And it's also, you're modeling a behavior you want them to adapt for themselves eventually too, or ideally. What else? Oh, I said lead with your heart. I think something I've learned, or I know something I've learned, not I think, is that this is a job that's more than a job. You get emotionally invested in people and clients, and I mean, I guess that's just kind of the person I am, and I think it's a good thing in this field to lead with your heart, to be invested. And yes, you have to have boundaries, and you can't like freak out or feel horrible when happens with clients and they're not doing well. But it's hard not to. It's hard not to care. I think anyone that goes into this field wouldn't be doing it if they didn't care. So yeah, leading with your heart, and you always know the answer. Like in your gut, if your gut is like saying something's off or something's wrong, it's probably off or wrong. Like listen to that. Don't second guess yourself. And if you're having trouble discerning how to handle a situation or what to do next, I really encourage you to check in with someone. Like I have a few other coaches that I'm friends with, and we'll consult like, oh, what should I do here, or what should I do there? So those are some of the biggest takeaways I've learned from coaching thus far. I hope that helps you.
3 things that I've really learned in my time being a recovery coach. The 3 most important things, I think number 1 is to honor your own time. So initially I was giving out my email address and my cell phone number and like text me, email me, call me if you need help. And I still do that. But then I found I was answering texts and emails at 10 o'clock at night, and then it was 11 o'clock at night, and then it was just getting later and later. And all of a sudden my friends pointed out to me, they said, Christy, you're not fun to hang out with anymore because you're always checking your phone. And that was a real reality check for me. To really put in some work-life balance. So what I say to clients now is I say, absolutely, please reach out. I say, these are my days off. I may not respond on those days. If I have time and space, I will, but please know that if I don't respond, it's because it's my days off. And some clients don't love that because the change was really hard for them to go to, from having a 24/7 on-call coach to a coach that had some boundaries around sleeping and personal time. And some clients didn't handle that change very well. So my advice to anyone starting out in the coaching arena is to really set your own boundaries around what you need for your self-time, for your relationships, for your friends, and really be okay with that. I think it's very easy to think like, oh, this text is very like they're saying, I can't do this, and it's exclamation marks and emojis and it's all panic. And the truth is they managed before us and they'll manage after us. So that is definitely my number one tip, is to honor your own time. The second thing I learned that was really helpful as a coach is the communication with the rest of the client's team. I got into coaching at the very beginning when it hadn't really been invented yet. And what I found is that a lot of team members were concerned that coaches would be taking over their jobs. And so really framing the conversation around with a therapist, how can I help you? How can I support you to help our client reach their goals? And really making the effort to put myself in a place of an adjunct support, even though we might be seeing the client more frequently than what the therapist or dietitian would be. Making sure I had that communication with the therapist and being like, hey, we worked on these goals. This is what we thought about for the future. What are your thoughts? And really inviting them to collaborate in that experience and have the input. And what I found is that therapists were really receptive to that. But I've certainly had some therapists that were not into coaches at all. And the client would come back to me and say, well, my therapist has said she doesn't want me to work with a coach. And that's difficult, because the client's like, well, I want to work with a coach because they get me. And I feel like my therapist doesn't really get me. And really having to be like, all right, how can we make this work? So my second piece of advice is to really put yourself within the team as really seeing yourself as an adjunct support, certainly an important support, but making it clear that you're in addition to the rest of the team and that you're not taking over. That's been really useful for relationships. And the third thing, so many things. I think not being attached to the results, and that's hard because I think as coaches, we do tend to see clients in more intimate sort of settings. Actually, I'm going to change my answer. I think that's still important, but the one that's speaking to me more strongly right now is to be okay to think outside of the box. And, I have so many examples, but I'll just think of the first time I ever started doing online coaching, and that was back when I was living in New Zealand and I had a client in New York and we were Skyping. That was before Zoom was invented. And she said to me, she was like, I'm really struggling with restriction and I don't know what to do today. And typically in a session, we'd talk about what she could do and then she'd go and do the food. But this particular session, she was so panicked and so out of herself. I was like, you know what, why don't you just grab your laptop and just show me what's in your fridge? And she was like, what do you mean? And I was like, just grab your laptop and open the fridge, show me what's in your fridge, and we'll figure it out together. And that opened up this whole box of shame for her about what was in her fridge and how she felt about it. And I understood immediately why she couldn't make a decision, because there was nothing in there. There was nothing to decide. So then I got her to take me around like her cupboards and her freezer, and then we managed to cobble together a meal and off we went. But I want to say, be okay to think outside the box. And so if a client's struggling with something, like I've been to the grocery store with clients just via like a phone call. They'll have their earbuds in so no one else can hear me, and they'll be in the pasta aisle freaking out about the pasta, and I'll be like, cool, what's your favorite color? They'll be like, red. Great, grab the red box, move on. So I think it's okay to really think outside the box. I've done sessions with clients while they're walking, because their impulse is to run. And so, and that's all been online. So I think coaching is this really cool space where you can play with different ideas and in the moment, because it's not in a therapy room per se, it's in people's lives, in their homes, in their cars, in their workplaces, at school. So my three things would be to definitely have boundaries around your personal time and be okay with it, to see yourself as an adjunct with a team, and to think outside the box and don't take anything personally.
So 3 ways to be successful as a coach. First of all, when I talk to newer coaches looking for advice, one of the most frequently asked questions is, how do I attract new clients and how do I build a successful practice? So I want to talk about that, and I want to help you with that. So I'm going to share with you those 3 keys that I have found to be just the most useful. Number 1 is respect your own boundaries and honor how you want to do the work. Do not compare yourself to other coaches and how they do it, right? We talk about comparison in recovery. The same holds true for actually being a coach. You know, if you have another job like myself and also coach because that's your passion work, you've got to balance those two. If you are all in a full-time coach, then you may have different parameters. Also, perhaps you are a morning person versus a night person, and you want to make sure you're on for your clients, so you would adjust those sessions accordingly. Or if you're a night person, you would do the opposite. So really just be clear, you know, about how you want to do the work. It's really important. Number 2, I highly recommend you connecting with other coaches. At least find one other coach that you can become friends with. And although you can't talk about the details of a certain case or a client, I should say, it is helpful to be able to bounce ideas off of someone else, you know, that's not in it with you, and gain some wisdom and insight. Or if nothing else, just talk about how you're feeling about as a coach. You know, sometimes it's very helpful when you have a really successful session to be able to call a fellow friend coach that can relate to you, or if you're feeling a little down, having someone there that can understand. And then thirdly, authenticity. We talk about this all the time in recovery, trying to help our clients really embrace who they truly are. This same important principle carries over into coaching. And how? First of all, it's about embracing your own strengths, your assets, as Carolyn talks about in the 8 keys, right? So if you're a writer, you know, write blogs, reach out to publications, really use that talent to put yourself out there. If you're a talker, do videos. Maybe you do a YouTube channel. Maybe you ask to be a guest on a popular podcast, or maybe you start your own podcast. If you're a networker, like me, maybe you go to events, you volunteer, and you build relationships. Whatever it is, I highly recommend you embracing your own strengths, be your authentic self, and really put yourself out there. And if you're able to do that, you will begin to start a successful practice for yourself. So just to repeat, honor your own boundaries and how you want to do the work, connect and build a relationship with other coaches, at least just one. And thirdly, be your authentic self when putting yourself out there. I hope this helps.
Okay, so Carolyn asked for 3 things I've learned as a coach, or 3 tips I can give as a coach. I've been a coach for over 2 years now. One is to listen more than talk. I find that the more you talk, the less engaged the client is with you and with what you're actually saying. And you really want to hear their point of view, their perspective, and get to the heart of what is happening with them and how their dysfunctional eating or their eating disorder is impacting their daily life. It's not about you. Your sessions are about them. Another tip is to be a coach, not a cheerleader. You know, you want to give some encouragement. It's important, but you don't want to overly praise. And you don't want to forget that you sometimes need to push them a little bit out of their comfort zone into an area that is of discomfort to really get them moving in the right direction. You're there to motivate them and to help them and to get them to where they want to be and where they need to be for their health going forward. And that's why they've hired you. That's why they've asked you to be a part of their team. So it's important to recognize that. You want to praise sometimes, you want to give that positive feedback, but you don't want to overly do it, because then it just seems like you're cheerleading them and it doesn't have as much of an impact as when something really monumental happens, some really meaningful change occurs, and then you praise them, it has a lot more impact and a lot more meaning than if you are simply giving them praise and positive rewards every single session for every single thing that they've done. Another thing is to remember that your sessions are about them. They're not about you. And you really need to figure out the strategies that work for that particular client that you're engaging with at any given time. You know, sometimes you'll find that a strategy works for a lot of different clients, but if it's not working for that one client that you're with at this point in time, that you're having that session with right now, you need to, you know, call an audible and change course. You need to find that strategy that works for that particular client. You have to remember that each client is an individual, and that what works for one doesn't necessarily work for another, doesn't necessarily work for all. So coaching is not a one size fits all, one thing works for all activity. It's something that is very individualized.